She was hired to follow the rules, nothing more. But when the storm came and the baby wouldn't stop crying, the nanny broke the most important one and fell asleep on the floor, cradling her in her arms. What the millionaire saw that night would change all three of their lives forever. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. The taxi slowed to a stop at the edge of a wrought iron gate, so tall it blocked the early sun. Sofia Alvarez paid the driver with careful fingers, counting each note before pressing them into his palm. Her savings had been thinning for months. Every fare she spent felt like another corner closing in. She stepped out with her single leather satchel and took in the view beyond the gate, a long driveway lined with manicured hedges leading to the Blackwell estate, its stone facade glinting under pale morning light. The interview was her only chance at a steady income, and she knew it. She had been searching for months, bouncing odd jobs to keep food on the table for her younger sister, Marisol. The thought of a real salary, enough to pay rent without bargaining over late fees, enough to buy fresh groceries without counting coins, had kept her awake the night before. She smoothed the second-hand blazer she had ironed twice that morning. The cuffs were a little frayed, the buttons mismatched, but it was the best she had. Inside the satchel was her modest resume: 2 years at a daycare, 3 years caring for Marisol since their parents had died in a car accident. No wealthy family experience, no references from elite agencies, just hard work and patience. At the gate, a uniformed guard checked her ID and radioed ahead. "You'll walk from here," he said, pressing a button to open the gate. The iron parted with a slow groan, revealing the long stone path that would take her to the front entrance. Each step made her more aware of the quiet. No street noise, no chatter, just the sound of her shoes on stone and the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. The mansion loomed larger with every stride, tall, symmetrical, and impossibly clean, with black shutters and wide glass windows that reflected the sky. When she reached the front steps, a woman in a crisp black uniform opened the door. "Miss Alvarez, this way, please." Her tone was polite but brisk, as though her time was too valuable to waste. Sofia followed her through a marble-floored foyer so wide she felt her footsteps echo back at her. Light poured in from a chandelier above, scattering across polished surfaces. She caught glimpses of other staff, a gardener carrying fresh flowers, a housekeeper dusting a table, each moving with quiet precision. They stopped outside a set of double doors. The woman knocked once, then pushed them open. Inside was a study lined with dark wooden shelves, each filled with neat rows of books. At the far end, a tall man in a charcoal gray suit strolling through something on a tablet. He looked up when she entered, his eyes a sharp, cool gray that seemed to measure her in seconds. "Miss Alvarez," he said. "Lucas Blackwell." His handshake was brief, firm, and distant. He gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. "I'll be direct. My daughter is 8 months old. She is my priority. I don't tolerate carelessness, lateness, or people who think this job is an opportunity to coast. Do you understand?" Sofia said quickly. "Worked with children before?" "Take care," and he glanced at her resume. "And raising your sister, no formal training beyond that?" "No, sir," she admitted, "but I—" The door opened behind her before she could finish. A woman stepped in, carrying a baby with fine wisps of dark hair and round cheeks flushed pink. The child's eyes, the same sharp gray as her father's, were wide and alert. "Is it?" Logan said, softening his tone slightly as he glanced at his daughter. "Lily, this is Miss Alvarez." The woman holding Lily shifted her weight. "She's been fussy all morning, sir. Didn't finish her bottle." Lucas frowned. "Try again after this meeting." But Lily's face began to crumple. A tiny whimper escaped, then grew into a sharper cry. The woman bounced her gently, murmuring under her breath, but the crying only grew louder. Sofia sat frozen for a moment, watching as another staff member entered with a pacifier. Lily turned her head away, crying harder now. The sound filled the room, high and desperate. "Take her to the nursery," Lucas instructed. "Wait," Sofia said, before she could stop herself. All eyes turned to her. She stood slowly, her palms damp. "May I?" she asked, looking at Lucas. He hesitated, clearly unused to being interrupted in his own office. "You think you can calm her?" "I'd like to try," Sofia said. He gave a small nod. The woman holding Lily looked doubtful, but handed her over. The baby was warm and squirming, her tiny fists curled tight. Sofia cradled her, swaying gently as she began to hum an old Spanish lullaby her mother had sung to her and Marisol on stormy nights. The crying softened within moments. Lily's fists relaxed, her head nestling against Sofia's shoulder. The hum was low and even, almost blending with the rhythm of Sofia's breathing. In the quiet that followed, Sofia caught Lucas watching. His arms were folded now, but his gaze was fixed not just on Lily, but on her, assessing, curious, and perhaps a fraction less guarded than before. Sofia continued humming until Lily's breathing slowed, the baby's lashes brushing her cheek. She adjusted her hold, supporting the small head in the crook of her arm, and began walking slowly around the room. Each step was instinctive, the sway of her body matching the rhythm of her song. The other staff exchanged glances, as if unsure whether to be impressed or surprised. The woman who had brought Lily in shifted her weight, clearly not used to seeing her calm so quickly. Lucas finally spoke. "You've done that before." Sofia glanced at him. "With my sister, yes. She used to cry for hours when she was a baby. This song? It always worked." Lucas's expression didn't change, but his eyes followed every movement. "You understand, this isn't just about calming her. This is about consistency, boundaries, safety." "Understand," Sofia said, "but sometimes they just need to feel safe in someone's arms." There was a pause. Then Lucas gestured to the chair again. "Sit. Keep holding her." Sofia eased into the chair, adjusting Lily so the baby was nestled against her chest. The quiet in the room felt different now. Not the cold hush of formality, but the softer quiet of a moment held still. "I've had 6 nannies in the past 8 months," Lucas said abruptly. "None of them lasted more than 2 weeks. They either couldn't handle the schedule or thought they knew better than I did. I don't have time for either." Sofia met his gaze. "I'm not here to replace you. I'm here to help her." Something flickered in his eyes, quick, almost imperceptible. 1-month trial. You'll shadow the current staff, follow the schedule exactly. No exceptions. If I like what I see, we'll extend. "Understand," she said. "You start tomorrow," he added. "Mrs. Grant will give you the paperwork and show you to the staff quarters." Sofia stood, still holding Lily, until the housekeeper stepped forward to take her. The baby stirred but didn't cry, only opened her eyes briefly before closing them again. As she handed her over, Sofia allowed herself one last glance at Lucas. He was already back at his desk, scrolling through something on his tablet. But she noticed his jaw wasn't as tight, his posture not quite as rigid as when she'd first walked in. Mrs. Grant led her through the wide corridors toward the staff wing. Sofia kept her steps measured, but her heart was racing. She had the job, for now. 1 month to prove she belonged here. 1 month to keep the pay coming for Marisol's school fees. The room she was shown was small, but clean, with a single bed, a wardrobe, and a narrow desk by the window. Sofia set her satchel down and sat on the bed, exhaling slowly. She thought about the baby's weight in her arms, the warmth of her tiny body, the way the lullaby had settled her so quickly, and she thought about Lucas Blackwell, his cool gray eyes, his measured words, and the strange moment when he had stood watching, silent but intent. Tomorrow, everything would begin. The next morning, Sofia dressed in a simple white blouse and dark trousers, her hair pulled neatly into a low ponytail. She was in the kitchen by 7, where Mrs. Grant stood at the counter reviewing a clipboard. "You're shadowing Elise today," Mrs. Grant said without looking up. "Follow her lead exactly." Elise, the woman who had brought Lily into Lucas's office the day before, entered from the pantry with a tray of sterilized bottles. Her uniform was immaculate, her expression neutral. "We start with Lily's feeding at 7:15. She gets 6 ounces of formula, warmed to precisely 98 degrees. No deviations." Sofia nodded. "Understood." They walked to the nursery, a soft-lit room with pale yellow walls and shelves lined with neatly folded blankets. Lily was already stirring in her crib. Elise lifted her with practiced efficiency, cradling her without a smile. Sofia noticed the way Lily's eyes scanned the room before settling on her face. Elise handed the baby to Sofia. "Support her. Hold the bottle at a 45-degree angle. Don't let her linger. She needs to finish in under 10 minutes or she gets fussy." Sofia followed the instructions, but she hummed softly as she fed Lily. It was instinct, the same way she had fed Marisol when she was small. Elise's eyes flicked toward her, but she said nothing. After the feeding came a strict schedule. Burping, a diaper change, 15 minutes of supervised floor play, and then back to the crib for a nap. Each activity was timed to the minute. There was no lingering, no extra cuddles. Once Lily was placed in her crib, the white noise machine was switched on, and the room was left in. By mid-morning, Sofia had learned the rest of the day's routine. Meals, play, and naps all ran on the same clock. There was a clear rule in the binder Elise handed her. No sleeping in the nursery, no holding the child for more than 5 minutes after feeding, no unscheduled time in her room. The staff worked like a well-oiled machine. Tasks were completed swiftly, voices stayed low, and interactions were minimal. It was efficient, but cold. At noon, Sofia was assigned to take Lily into the sunroom for her next feeding. The glass walls looked out onto the manicured back garden, where sunlight filtered through the leaves in shifting patterns. She held Lily in her lap, the bottle in one hand, and found herself humming again. This time she told Lily a small story between sips about a bird she had seen on her walk to the bus stop that morning, a bright yellow one that had reminded her of the dress Marisol used to wear. Lily's eyes stayed fixed on her face, the sucking slowing as she listened. Sofia smiled, letting the words come naturally. What she didn't notice was the small camera tucked into the corner of the ceiling, its red light faint but steady. From his office upstairs, Lucas had glanced at the monitor while reviewing a contract. He watched for a moment as Sofia spoke to Lily, the baby's gaze locked on her, her small hands resting on Sofia's wrists. It wasn't the schedule, it wasn't what he'd instructed, but he didn't reach for the intercom. He watched another 30 seconds, then returned to his work. That afternoon, Elise directed her to take Lily for fresh air in the enclosed patio. The sky was bright, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of the garden. Sofia wheeled the stroller to a quiet spot, unbuckled Lily, lifting her into her arms. She pointed to the flowers, naming each color. She let Lily curl her small fingers around a blade of grass before gently taking it back. Inside, Elise checked the clock and reminded her it was time for the nap window. Sofia nodded but continued speaking softly to Lily all the way back to the nursery. By evening, Sofia felt the pull in her back from carrying and bending, but she also felt something warmer, the beginnings of a connection. Lily had smiled twice that day, both times when Sofia spoke to her. Over the next week, Sofia learned the rhythms of the house. Breakfast in the kitchen was silent except for the clink of utensils. Staff spoke to one another in brief, functional sentences. Meals for Lily were prepared with exact measurements. Toys were rotated according to a chart. The rules remained clear: minimal holding, minimal noise, no personal touches. But Sofia found small spaces between them. She sang while folding Lily's laundry. She placed a soft cloth book in the crib so Lily could look at the pictures before falling asleep. She carried her into the garden for 5 minutes longer than the schedule allowed, letting her feel the breeze against her. Each time, she expected to be corrected, but no one said a word. Twice, she caught sight of Lucas in the hallway, his gaze briefly flicking toward her before moving on. Once, she thought she saw the corner of his mouth twitch upward when Lily babbled as they passed. Late one evening, after Lily had been put down for the night, Sofia walked past the study. The door was half open. Lucas sat at his desk, the monitor angled so she could see the split-screen feeds from the security cameras. For a moment, their eyes met, his cool and unreadable, hers caught between apology and defiance. He didn't speak, only returned his gaze to the. The following afternoon, she was feeding Lily in the sunroom again when a knock came at the door. It was Mrs. Grant with a package. "For you," she said, handing over a small box wrapped in plain paper. Inside was a set of 3 soft cloth books, animals, colors, and shapes. No note. That evening, Sofia read the animal book to Lily before her nap. The baby reached for the pages with eager fingers, and Sofia laughed quietly. She wondered if Lucas had sent them. By the end of her second week, the staff's initial reserve toward her had softened slightly. Elise no longer frowned when she sang to Lily. Mrs. Grant asked once about Marisol, and Sofia found herself talking briefly about her sister's school and how she was studying art. But Lucas remained a constant question mark. She felt his presence even when he wasn't in the room, in the unspoken awareness that he was watching, judging if her warmth was genuine or temporary. One night, after Lily had fallen asleep against her shoulder during a feeding, Sofia hesitated before placing her in the crib. She held her for another minute, breathing in the faint, powdery scent of her hair. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked. She didn't turn to see if anyone was there. The rain began as a distant whisper against the high windows, a hush that sounded almost polite. By 8, the hush thickened, the wind pressed its palm to the glass, and the house drew itself a little tighter around its halls. Sofia Alvarez folded Lily's tiny sleepers on the edge of her narrow bed, smoothing every seam, pretending steadiness with her hands while the sky lost its patience outside. She had learned the rhythm of the Blackwell estate these last 2 weeks. The dinner dishes were stacked and dried, the hallways settled into low-lit quiet. Mrs. Grant made tea she never finished. Elise checked tomorrow's feeding chart like a pilot checking weather. Somewhere upstairs, the soft red dots of the security cameras blinked. Somewhere across town, Lucas Blackwell pursued numbers that never slept. The first thunder sounded like a door slamming at the end of the world. Sofia flinched and stood still, listening. A second crack rolled over the roof, closer, an angry drum that made the windows shiver. She thought of Marisol back in their apartment, brave in daylight, uneasy at the love-dropping rumble of a storm, and she whispered a quick prayer that the power would hold. It did. The lamp stayed warm beside her. The white noise machine in the nursery purred like a seashell. For 5 minutes the rain was only rain. Then Lily cried. Not the fussy cry, not the "I'm bored" cry, the sharp, startled cry that cut through doors and the distance of a hallway. Sofia moved before thought, the way you move when a glass tips or a breath stumbles. Rules were for daylight. This was a child. She slipped into the corridor, bare feet, silent on the runner, stormlight strobing the frames on the wall. The nursery door was almost closed, a nightlight glowing behind it like a small moon. When she pushed it open, she found Lily sitting in the crib, both hands clutching the rail, cheeks wide at the next bruising boom. "Trochini," she said, voice low, steady by decision if not by heart. She slid her hands under Lily's arms, lifted her free of the rail, and gathered her close. The baby trembled, then pressed her face into Sofia's collarbone with a broken sob. Sofia walked. Back and forth, heel to toe. She rocked, she patted, she hummed the old song that belonged to rainy kitchens and candlelight in the Alvarez home. Lily's cries fell from a cliff to a hill, then to hiccups. But whenever Sofia tipped toward the crib, the little body stiffened and the cries sharpened again, the small fists tightening like knots. "It's all right," Sofia murmured. "I'm here." She said it like a fact she could prove. Lightning whitened the ceiling. The thunder that followed felt inside the rib cage. Lily jerked and clung harder. The rocking chair would squeak. The bed was too far. The floor was simple. Sofia pulled the quilt from the storage bench, spread it beside the crib, and lowered herself carefully, keeping Lily anchored against her. The carpet was thick under her shoulder, the storm heavy over the roof. She curled her body like a parenthesis, a shelter around a sentence that needed finishing. Lily's breathing found the lullaby and matched it. In, out, in, out. The tension in her legs unspooled. The little hand that had clutched Sofia's blouse slid open and rested, warm and trusting, on Sofia's arm. She did not lay the child down. She did not reach for the clock. She sang through 2 verses, then 3, the vowels soft as rain. Her own eyes burned. She thought of the week she turned 18 and became both sister and mother. She thought of the morning the landlord raised the rent and Marisol hid her half-finished sketchbook under the bed because paper felt expensive. She thought of the first time a daycare baby fell asleep on her chest and how the room had gone quiet like a blessing. She thought of Lucas Blackwell's warning voice and decided, without apology, that sometimes breaking a rule was how you kept a person whole. Another flash, another boom. Lily startled, then settled. The white noise steadied. Sofia adjusted the quilt over the baby's back. The scent of baby shampoo and clean cotton and faint milk filled the small space between them. The rest of the house could have been a continent away. Minutes slowed to something without numbers. The storm argued with itself. Once, Sofia heard footsteps at the far end of the hall and held her breath, ready to explain, ready to take the consequence. But the steps faded and the house returned to listening. She kept her palms spread wide on the baby's back, her fingers moving in circles like small suns. Her phone, face down on the bedside table in her room, would show 2 unread messages from Marisol in the morning. One photograph of a charcoal drawing of hands laced together, one sentence that read, "Are you okay?" Sofia smiled at the thought without opening her eyes. "I am now," she whispered, and meant both of them. The storm shifted from rage to insistence. The space between thunder grew longer. The rain learned to breathe again. Lily's mouth slackened in sleep. Sofia felt the heavy sweetness of that trust, and for the first time since entering the room, let the weight of the day lean back against her spine. She tugged the quilt corner under her hip to keep the draft out. The nightlight made a small halo on the carpet. The world narrowed to warmth. Across the city, a driver took a wrong turn that added 10 minutes to a route. A traffic light blinked red over an empty intersection and held too long. In an elevator 3 floors below the top, a man checked his watch twice and then put it away, as if that might slow whatever he was returning to. Weather is the old excuse for delay. Sometimes it is also the gift. Down the corridor, Elise paused outside the linen closet with a stack of towels and listened. She knew the rule printed in bold in the binder. She also knew the way fear sound in a baby's throat. She set the towels down and did not open the nursery door. She picked them up again and kept walking. Sofia's breathing slowed with Lily's. Sleep tugged, not with the sharp pull of exhaustion, but with the gentle gravity that follows relief. She told herself she would stay awake. She told herself she would count to 100 and then ease Lily to the mattress. She got to 37 and forgot what came next. She woke at 49 and started over. At 61 she smiled because the numbers were already soft and far. The last thing she felt was the weight of Lily's small palm, warmer than any blanket. Outside, rain braided itself into steadier strands. The hedges bent and held. Somewhere on the far edge of the property, the motion sensor blinked at a fox and decided it was not an intruder. The house sighed, the way large houses do when night persuades them to be something gentler than museums. The nursery kept its small circle of light, its small circle of breath. The storm went on, making its arguments to the. Inside the circle, no one needed to answer. And for a while, the world finally listened. The front door opened just before midnight, a gust of wet air barging in with Lucas Blackwell. He tipped his head, water sliding from his hair onto the slate, and peeled his coat away in one practiced motion. The expressway had become a river of red lights, then a stuttering crawl, then a standstill while lightning stitched white seams across the horizon. He had returned messages, signed an authorization on his phone with a finger that would not warm, and thought about the one rule he never bent. Lily's sleep is sacred. Mrs. Grant waited in the foyer with a towel warmed in the dryer. Lucas took it and scrubbed rain from his face and the back of his neck. "She go down?" he asked, voice low out of habit more than necessity. "Usual," Mrs. Grant said, then added, "The thunder woke her for a while." She did not add anything else. She did not need to. He walked the long hall, shoes quiet on the runner, the house a corridor of held breath. On the walls, frames returned his reflection in slices, a cheekbone here, a silver thread at the temple there, as if the place preferred him in parts. A big house can make a man feel ceremonial. Tonight, he only felt late. The nursery door stood ajar. He put his hand to the frame and pushed it open an inch, then 2. The nightlight painted everything in amber. The crib waited, the rocking chair waited, and on the floor, on the quilt that usually hosted the afternoon book, Sofia lay, curled on her side, with Lily tucked in the harder of her arms, the blanket pulled over both like a small tent against weather. He did not step forward, he did not speak, he only looked. Lily's breathing came soft and even, her tiny mouth open a little, the wet lashes fanned on her cheek. One small foot pressed against Sofia's forearm, the toes relaxed in a peace he hadn't seen since the hospital. Sofia's hand rested over the child's ribs, not gripping, only weighing the rise and fall as if listening by touch. Her face in sleep held a crease between the brows that told him she had not surrendered the watch, even while dreaming. The rules slid a measure out of place inside him. He had written them when the world felt like a breaking wave. Schedules, charts, a binder with tabs. He had made a raft out of order and pulled his daughter onto it. It had kept them from drowning. It had also kept the shore far away. Southerners trudged across the roof. Sofia did not stir. Lily sighed. Lucas stepped back into the hall, aware of how easily a single word could break the scene and startle fear awake again. He did not say the word. He went to the linen closet, took a softer blanket than the one on the quilt, and returned to the door. He waited for the quiet between flashes, then eased the blanket over them both without letting the fabric whisper. Sofia made a sound that wasn't a word and slept deeper. Lily's hand twitched, found nothing to hold, then stayed open. He stood in the doorway longer than he meant to. He had been around competence all his life, people who could execute, deliver, achieve. This was a different kind of competence. The exact shape of presence a frightened child needed, offered without anyone watching, offered at personal cost and without permission slips. He left the door half closed and walked to the study. He did not turn on the overhead light. The desk lamp was enough. The monitors on the cabinet hummed out their faithful images. Rain silvering the terrace, the driveway glistening, a quiet rectangle of nursery with a corner of quilt. He minimized the feeds and opened a blank email. "Dear Miss Alvarez," he typed, then deleted, "Dear," he wrote, and saw "Dear, dear." He watched the cursor blink like a metronome and realized he did not know how to begin an apology that didn't sound like a verdict. He closed the email and stood at the window instead. Lightning mapped the branches on the glass. He remembered watching Sofia feed Lily in the sunroom, telling a story about a yellow bird. He remembered thinking the story had no measurable function and noticing that Lily's shoulders dropped while she listened. He remembered seeing 3 cloth books on the receipt his assistant had stapled to a report and telling himself he bought them for efficiency. He remembered and didn't argue with memory. One by one, habits loosened. He loosened his tie, he loosened his jaw, he loosened the thought that being careful required being cold. He poured coffee, took 2 sips and set it aside. He opened his calendar and moved a morning call he could endure later. He dragged a block of time into the afternoon and labeled it, listening, then smirked at himself and kept it there. At 2, he walked the hall again and left a bottle of water by Sofia's door. At 3, the storm grew tired of its own voice and rain learned to fall like breathing. At 3:30, he returned to the nursery and looked in. Sofia had shifted onto her back. Lily sprawled across her shoulder, one arm flung out like a small star, the other tucked under Sofia's chin. The hand that had been a sentinel over the tiny ribs still rested there. Lucas surprised himself by smiling. Not with relief, not with triumph, with the quiet joy of witnessing an ordinary miracle and recognizing that nothing was required of him except to protect the conditions that allowed it. He went back to the study and wrote 2 words on a sticky note, "Trust her," and pressed it to the corner of the monitor, where data usually want his eye first. He sat, then stood again, then sat. He tried a contract. He read the same sentence 3 times and could not keep its shape in his head. Just before dawn, the storm thinned to drizzle. The birds in the hedges sent out cautious notes like scouts. The house uncurled. Lucas rose from the chair and felt the ache in his shoulders you get from carrying what you didn't admit was heavy. He walked the hall one more time. At the nursery door he paused, then stepped inside, far enough to be part of the room. "Thank you," he whispered, as if gratitude were a secret the carpet could keep. The word belonged to both of them. He left the door as he found it and let the quiet remain. In the kitchen, he found a clean mug and the last of last night's coffee. It was cold and stubborn and exactly right. He stood at the window and watched the sky do that early thing where gray discovers color. He thought of the raft of rules and the shore he had wanted but feared, and he decided a raft with windows was still a raft, and windows were how you found land. Something in him had moved. Not loudly, not with a speech, with the soft click of a lock lifted from a door he hadn't opened in a year. He rinsed the mug, set it upside down to dry, and let the house know, in the only language it would understand, that morning was permitted to come in. He breathed, and for once the breath stayed, growing steadier. The rain had passed, leaving the estate washed clean in pale gold light. Dew clung to the clipped hedges and sparkled like 1,000 small lanterns. Somewhere beyond the garden walls, the world resumed its usual urgency, but here the air felt reluctant to move, as if the house itself was still listening to the quiet of the night before. Sofia stirred before her alarm. Her back ached faintly from the floor's firmness, and a crimp ran across her cheek where the quilt had pressed against her skin. She blinked, saw the soft rise and fall of Lily's chest, and allowed herself one more moment of stillness before easing the baby into her crib. Lily fussed once, rolled to her side, and sighed into the safety of the blanket. Sofia stood, smoothed her hair, and tucked the quilt back into the storage bench. No one needed to know, she thought. Not about the rules she'd broken, not about the warmth that still lingered where a small body had rested against hers. She left the nursery quietly, padding down the hall toward her room to freshen up before breakfast duties began. She didn't hear Lucas until she reached the bottom of the main staircase. His voice came from the archway to the kitchen, low, even, impossible to read. Eris? Her spine tightened. The formal address meant distance. She turned, hands clasped behind her back to keep them still. Yes, Mr. Blackwell? His gaze held hers, steady but not unkind. I saw you in Lily's room last night. The words landed like stones in her stomach. She imagined the cameras, the silent replay of her bending the rules, the precise lines of the contract she had signed. She drew in a slow breath. She was frightened by the storm. I didn't want to. Thank you, he said, cutting gently across her explanation. Sofia froze, unsure if she'd heard him correctly. You stayed with her until she calmed, Lucas continued. That matters more than the rules. He didn't smile, but something in his expression, a loosening at the edges, made her think of a door cracked open to let in air. I'm glad she's all right, Sofia managed, her voice softer than she intended. He nodded once, almost briskly, then turned toward the breakfast room. Conversation over. She stood for a beat longer before following the scent of fresh coffee. Clara, the long-serving housekeeper, was setting out the morning plates with her usual precision. She gave Sofia a sidelong glance, one eyebrow lifting as if to say, "You survived." Once Lucas stepped into his study with a phone call, Clara leaned closer. He hasn't said that to anyone since. She stopped, glancing toward the closed study door. Since before his wife passed. Sofia kept her voice low. I didn't mean to break the rules. Clara's eyes softened. Rules are there because he's afraid of losing what's left. But fear can freeze a person in place. Since she died, he's been colder. Distant. Nannies come and go. Some leave after a week. Others are asked to. She paused, then added, You've lasted longer than most. Already. Sofia didn't know whether to feel relieved or uneasy. I'm only doing my job. Clara gave her a knowing look. You're doing more than that, whether you mean to or not. Before Sofia could reply, Lily's small wail drifted down the hall. Sofia excused herself, grateful for the distraction, and went to collect her. Lily's arms reached for her the moment she stepped into view. The sight never failed to warm something in Hunter's chest, the instinctive trust, the way the baby's whole face lit in recognition. She lifted her easily, murmuring good mornings in both English and Spanish, and felt Lily's little fingers twine into her hair. By the time they returned to the breakfast room, Lucas was seated at the head of the table, a newspaper folded beside his plate. He glanced up as they entered, and for a fraction of a second his focus shifted entirely to Lily, the kind of look that said his day began and ended with her well-being. But then he noticed how Lily leaned into Sofia, her small body pressing close, and something unreadable flickered across his. Sofia settled into the chair beside the high chair, coaxing Lily into her seat with gentle patience. "There we go, sweetheart. Let's have some fruit first." Lucas poured coffee into his cup, the porcelain clinked sharp in the stillness. "She seems attached to you." Sofia kept her tone light. "She's very easy to love." His mouth curved faintly, but his eyes remained guarded. "I'm aware." He reached to offer Lily a piece of toast, but the baby turned her head, gaze fixed on Sofia, until she offered a spoonful of mashed banana. Only then did Lily accept, opening her mouth happily. Gratitude, and something else, something with sharper edges, passed over Lucas's features. Sofia caught it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers drummed once against the tabletop before stilling. The rest of the meal passed in polite quiet. Lucas asked about Lily's sleep schedule. Sofia answered with concise details. She mentioned the possibility of more time outdoors now that the weather had cleared. He made a non-committal sound. Nothing in his manner was overtly unkind, but the air between them carried a charge, as though they were both aware of an invisible line neither wanted to cross. For different reasons. When breakfast ended, Sofia wiped Lily's hands and cheeks, lifting her from the high chair. The baby clung for a moment, resting her head on Sofia's shoulder, before Sofia set her down in the playpen near the windows. Sunlight pooled there, warming the carpet. Lucas lingered a moment longer, watching his daughter stack colorful blocks with clumsy determination. "I'll be in the study most of the morning," he said finally. "If you need anything, ask Clara." It wasn't dismissal exactly, more like a retreat. "Of course," Sofia replied, her voice even. He left without another word. The click of the study door closing felt louder than it should. Clara passed through a moment later to collect the dishes. "Don't take it personally," she murmured. "He's complicated." Sofia forced a small smile. "Aren't we all?" But the truth was, she had already begun adjusting her own steps, avoiding unnecessary conversation, keeping to the routines that didn't require his involvement. She could feel the walls around him as surely as if they were made of brick, and she had no intention of pushing against them. Not when she needed this job, not when Lily's well-being depended on stability. She spent the rest of the morning, moving through her tasks with quiet efficiency, reading to Lily from the stack of board books in the nursery, measuring formula with careful precision, tidying the play area. Every so often, she caught a glimpse of movement in the hallway or the edge of a doorway, a shadow that might have been Lucas watching for a moment before disappearing again. If he was testing her, she intended to pass. Still, when she held Lily before her nap and felt the baby's fingers curl into the fabric of her blouse, Sofia wondered if Lucas noticed the difference between care given out of duty and care given out of something warmer, and if he did, whether it scared him more than it reassured him. The afternoon unfolded in careful increments, the kind that made hours feel measured instead of lived. Sofia took Lily into the sunroom for supervised play, spreading out soft blocks and a fabric tunnel that unfurled like a small blue wave. The baby crawled through it with triumphant squeals, pausing only to turn and make sure Sofia was watching. She clapped and narrated in a low voice. Each word seemed to reassure Lily that the world could be named and therefore trusted. When the nap window came, Sofia dimmed the shades and began the lullaby again, letting the notes drift like threads of calm. Lily's cheeks were rosy, her fists uncurled by the time her breathing evened out. Sofia eased the crib rail up and lingered for a heartbeat, resisting the temptation to smooth the small shoulder one last time. Instead, she busied herself with straightening the changing table, restoring the quiet order that made the nursery feel safe. She almost collided with Clara in the hallway. The housekeeper balanced a basket of folded linens on her hip, her gaze deliberate. "He thanked you," she said in a near whisper, as though repeating it might make it vanish. "I heard him," Sofia replied, equally soft. "Tanya's own words fell from hers," Clara said. "Doesn't fix everything, but it opens a window." Placed toward the kitchen together. Clara filled a kettle, not for tea, she said, but for company. And over the hush of running water, her voice dropped. "When Mrs. Blackwell died, this house became a museum. Mr. Blackwell stopped using the rooms that felt like memory. He loves that child with a fierceness that scares him. Your warmth frightens him because it asks him to risk again. Sofia curled her hands around the warm mug Clara passed her. I don't want to make things harder. You're making things human, Clara said simply. Hard and human are cousins. A faint crackle from the baby monitor interrupted them, then faded. Both women held still until it was quiet again. For the next hour, Sofia updated Lily's logs, minutes, moods, an alphabet of care for someone who preferred precision over sentiment. She crossed out and rewrote lines to keep them factual, but here and there added details only close watching could provide, like how Lily reached with her left hand for the soft. By late afternoon, the rain clouds had thinned to a pale blue, the garden glistening as though newly minted. Sofia got Claire's nod to take Lily for a short stroll, and wheeled the stroller down the gravel path. The hedge still wore jeweled drops of water, and a robin hopped along the stones like it owned them. Halfway down, Sofia felt that shift in the air, the prickle of being watched. She kept narrating to Lily, naming the bird, the hedge, the sound of wheels on gravel. Only when the path curved did she glance up to the library windows and see Lucas standing there, hands in his pockets, face unreadable. She didn't wave, didn't slow. She walked as though nothing about this day was unusual, as though gratitude and jealousy weren't pulling at the same invisible rope between them. Lily squealed at a patch of sunlight, and the moment broke. Eyes again, routine took over. Bottles to sterilize, bibs to fold, a quick call to Marisol that lasted just under 8 minutes. Her sister described a sketch in progress, older hands holding small ones, and Sofia pictured the charcoal dust darkening her fingers. She told Marisol she was fine, twice, and meant it, once. Evening arrived with the scent of rosemary and roasted chicken. The dining room lamp cast a warm pool of light over the table. Lucas came in last, tie gone, sleeves rolled, still carrying the residue of his workday. He took his seat at the head of the table, then hesitated briefly, as if it belonged to a version of himself he no longer quite recognized. Lily banged her spoon on the tray, startled herself, and laughed. Over dinner, Lucas asked questions pitched between business and care. How many ounces in the second feeding? If the rash on her chin was fading, whether the outdoor time had improved her post-nap mood. Sofia answered in the same calm tone, thankful for facts that could hold meaning without spilling into feeling. Twice, he reached to give Lily her water cup. Twice, Lily chose Sofia's wrist instead. The second time, something in Lucas's expression tightened. Not anger, but the shadow of longing pressed inward. He drew back, listening as Sofia recited the bedtime steps like a litany. He nodded at each point, as though memorizing a map that might keep him from getting lost. After the plates were cleared, Lucas lingered by the sideboard, pretending to study a decanter. Sofia lifted Lily from the high chair, and the baby curled into her without hesitation, head under Sofia's chin like a bird finding its nest. Good night, Sofia said to the room. Lucas's response came just late enough to notice. Good night. The bedtime routine played out with practiced gentleness. Warm bath, soft towel pats, moon-printed pajamas, a trace of lotion on tiny feet. Sofia narrated each step, not for Lily's understanding, but to weave the night into safety. She sang the lullaby softer than before, watching Lily's eyes grow heavy. At the nursery door, Sofia paused, eased the latch soundlessly, and stepped into the hall. The corridor was empty, but she felt the weight of being observed. She moved quickly toward her room. Lucas emerged from the study just as she passed. Miss Alvarez, he began. Then, Sofia. She stopped. Yes. Wanted to say. Lily seemed calmer. Thank you. You're welcome, she said, then, careful to keep her tone neutral. Good night, Mr. Blackwell. He nodded. Good night. Sofia finished the walk to her room with her gaze on the runner's pattern, tucking the exchange away as proof that distance could still be polite. Behind her, the study door shut softly. Sitting on her bed, she let the day settle. Gratitude for the child sleeping beyond the wall. Caution for the man whose gratitude came in guarded drops. She sent Marisol a photo of the robin and the message, "Some days are small and good." Marisol replied with a heart and a sketch in progress. Two wrists, one adult, one infant, joined by attention rather than grip. Sofia set the phone down and made her own rule. Avoid what isn't necessary, make what is necessary kind, and let Lily's needs decide the rest. Down the hall, Lucas stood at the darkened study window, replaying the moment Lily had chosen Sofia's hand over his. He had thanked her twice, but felt as though he'd said nothing. Testing her felt prudent. Trusting her felt inevitable. Both were risks. He took the sticky note from his desk, tucked it into his wallet, and turned from the window. The house settled into its hush. The distance remained, but it felt measured now, not endless. For tonight, measured was enough. It began quietly. At first, Sofia thought Lily was just more tired than usual. The baby's eyes seemed heavier, her little hands resting limply in her lap instead of reaching for the toys in front of her. But when Sofia touched her cheek, a wave of heat pulsed against her palm. Her stomach tightened. She reached for the digital thermometer in the nursery drawer. The number blinked up at her, 102.8. Too high, too sudden. The rules in the Blackwell house were clear. All medical decisions went through Lucas. But Lucas wasn't here. He had left early that morning for an important investor meeting in the city, saying he'd be out late. Sofia had no way of knowing when he'd check his phone, or if he even could. She pulled out her own phone and dialed his number, straight to voicemail. She tried again, still nothing. The business card from the pediatrician's office sat in the top drawer. She didn't hesitate. "Lisa Sofia Alvarez, nanny for Lily Blackwell?" she said when the receptionist answered. "She's running a fever. Hi. Yes, I can bring her in. Yes, immediately." Within 10 minutes, she had Lily wrapped in a soft blanket, her head resting weakly against Sofia's shoulder. Clara met her at the door with the car keys and a look of relief. "Go," the housekeeper said. "I'll handle things." At the clinic, the pediatrician examined Lily carefully, listening to her breathing, checking her throat, her ears. "Viral fever," he said. "Nothing above 104 or she becomes unresponsive. If it climbs above 104 or she becomes unresponsive, bring her back immediately." Sofia nodded, taking notes on her phone. She held Lily close the whole drive back, whispering assurances the baby might not fully understand, but could feel. At night, Sofia stayed in the nursery. She didn't care about the no sleeping in the room rule. Lily's skin was damp with sweat, her breath shallow at times, but her tiny fingers clung to Sofia's shirt like an anchor. Sofia wiped her forehead with a cool cloth, administered the medicine on schedule, and sang softly in the dim light until Lily's body relaxed again. It was well past midnight when the fever finally dipped into safer territory. Sofia leaned against the wall, exhaustion washing over her, but she didn't dare sleep. Each time Lily stirred, she was there instantly, a shadow of comfort, a steady hand on her back. The sound of the front door opening jolted her. It was nearly 1 a.m. Lucas's footsteps were quick, clipped, and deliberate as they approached the nursery. The door swung open, and he stopped in the doorway, his eyes darting from Sofia to Lily in her arms. His face hardened instantly. "What happened?" Sofia shifted Lily, speaking low, so as not to wake her. "She spiked a fever this afternoon. I tried to call you. Your phone... You took her to the doctor without telling me?" His voice was sharp enough to make her flinch. "I told you I called," Sofia said, matching his quiet intensity. "It went straight to voicemail. Twice. Doesn't mean you make decisions for my daughter without me." Sofia's pulse pounded in her ears. She was burning up, Lucas. "I wasn't going to wait hours for you to check your phone while she suffered. You could have left a message, texted, informed someone. Instead, I acted, her voice trembling with the force she was holding back. Because she needed help now, not later. I'm here to take care of her, not to watch her get worse while I follow rules that don't make sense in a crisis." The muscle in his jaw ticked. "You think I don't know how to take care of my own child?" "Isn't about you," Sofia shot back. "It's about Lily, and the fact that your rules are more about control than about what's best for her." Silence fell, but it wasn't calm. It was charged, heavy, like the air before a storm breaks. Lucas's gaze locked on hers, unreadable except for the flicker of something. Anger? Yes, but also something else, something he wasn't naming. "I can't have someone here who doesn't respect my boundaries," he said finally. Sofia's throat tightened. "Then maybe you should find someone else." The words hung between them, heavier than she expected. Lily stirred then, her eyes fluttering open. She whimpered softly before spotting Sofia's face. A tiny hand reached up, clutching at her shirt. Sofia looked down at her, then back at Lucas. "Do you want me to put her in the crib so I can pack my things?" Lucas hesitated, just for a moment, but it was enough to feel like a crack in his certainty. "No," he said finally, his tone still clipped. "We'll talk in the morning." The morning light in the nursery was soft and pale, filtered through the sheer curtains. Lily was still asleep in Sofia's arms, her little chest rising and falling in an easier rhythm now. The fever had broken sometime before dawn, but Sofia hadn't moved. Every time she thought about laying Lily down, those small fingers tightened against her shirt. She heard the creak of the floorboards in the hallway before Lucas appeared in the doorway again. He wasn't in a suit today, just a dark sweater and jeans, but his expression was still guarded. "Who is she?" he asked, voice low. "Better," Sofia replied, equally quiet. "Temperature's down to 99. She's been resting well." Lucas stepped closer, his eyes flicking briefly over Lily's sleeping face before settling back on Sofia. "You didn't sleep." "I didn't need to," she said. She did. Something flickered in his gaze, not quite guilt, but the shadow of it. "I should have been here." Sofia's lips pressed together. "Yes, you should have." He flinched slightly at the bluntness, but didn't argue. "I'm not used to other people making those calls for her," he admitted after a moment. "Since her mother died, it's just been me." "The staff," Sofia reminded him, "but they follow your orders to the letter, even if it means doing nothing until you say otherwise. That's not always what she needs." Lucas's jaw tightened again, but he didn't immediately fire back this time. "I worry about too much change," he said finally. "Too much attachment. Nannies come and go. I can't let her rely on someone who might not stay." Sofia shifted Lily slightly, brushing a stray curl from the baby's forehead. "That's not her problem to worry about, it's yours. And if you're so afraid of her getting hurt, maybe think about how much worse it would be for her if no one showed up when she needed them most." The words landed between them like a stone in still water, rippling outward. Lucas glanced away first, moving toward the crib. "May I?" Sofia hesitated, then slowly transferred Lily into his arms. The baby stirred, blinking groggily at the change, but when she realized who was holding her, her little hands reached toward Sofia again. Lucas stilled. "She's been like that all morning," Sofia said quietly. "Every time I try to step away, she panics." His brows drew together, the faintest trace of jealousy curling at the edge of his expression. "She's attached to you." "Feels safe," Sofia corrected gently. "That's not a bad thing." They stood there for a long moment, the air between them thick with unspoken thoughts. Lucas's grip on Lily was steady, but Sofia could see the tension in his shoulders, as if every instinct told him to draw a line, to keep distance, but some other part of him was wavering. Finally, he exhaled slowly. "I overreacted last night." Sofia's mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "A little." He looked at her, a faint spark of reluctant amusement in his eyes, but it faded quickly. "Still, I expect to be told about anything like this immediately. Even if my phone's off, find another way. Call the office, call Clara, call my driver. I can't know." Tia nodded. "Fair enough. But you have to trust me to make decisions in the moment when you can't be reached. That's part of the job." Lucas's lips pressed together, but after a pause, he gave a short nod. "Agreed." The truce felt fragile, but it was there. Later that afternoon, Lily woke with more of her usual energy, babbling softly as Sofia fed her. Lucas lingered in the background longer than usual, watching the ease between them. Every so often, Sofia caught his gaze, but he'd glance away quickly, as if unsure what to do with what he was seeing. By early evening, the exhaustion of the night before caught up with Sofia. Clara insisted she go rest for a while, promising to keep an eye on Lily. Sofia retreated to her small bedroom, lying down on the bed, but she had barely closed her eyes when she heard the sharp, plaintive wail of a baby's. She was on her feet instantly, hurrying to the nursery. Lucas was there already, holding Lily, but the baby's arms were stretched toward the door, toward Sofia. Lucas looked over his shoulder at her, a trace of something unspoken in his expression. Reluctantly, he handed Lily over. The crying stopped almost immediately. "Huh? Really? Won't let go of you," he murmured. Sofia held Lily close, feeling the baby's head settle against her shoulder. "Sometimes we don't choose who we trust, we just know." The words seemed to linger in the room, heavier than either of them expected. Lucas studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod before leaving the nursery without another word. That night, Sofia sat with Lily in the rocking chair until the baby finally drifted into a deeper sleep. She laid her gently in the crib, tucking the blanket around her, and stood there for a moment in the soft light. She thought about quitting, about walking away before things became too complicated, before she started to care more than she should. But then Lily's tiny hand reached out in her sleep, brushing the air as if searching for her. Sofia leaned down, let the baby's fingers curl briefly around hers, and knew she wasn't going anywhere. The morning after Lily's fever scare, the nursery was filled with a hush that felt almost sacred. Sunlight streamed in, golden and warm, spilling over the crib where Lily slept peacefully. Lucas stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, watching her tiny fingers twitch and dream. He had come in quietly so as not to wake her, but something caught his eye. A folded slip of paper rested near her blanket, the edges slightly crumpled as though it had been clutched in small hands. Lucas set his mug down on the dresser and picked it up carefully. The handwriting was neat, but not formal. "Be brave like a lion, Lily. You are stronger than you know, and you are loved more than you will ever understand. When the world feels big and scary, remember you have a roar inside you, and a tunnel underground to reach for." Lily's eyes. There was a tiny doodle at the bottom, a smiling lion holding the hand of a little girl. Lucas stared at it for a long moment, feeling something twist deep in his chest. This wasn't a perfunctory note left out of obligation. It was love, and he realized with an uncomfortable pang that Sofia had been giving Lily something no one else in this house, including himself, had managed in months. He folded the note and slipped it into his pocket before quietly leaving the room. Downstairs, Clara was polishing the silver tea service in the kitchen. She looked up in mild surprise when Lucas walked in, still holding the note between his fingers. Globally. "Do you know anything about this?" he asked, holding it out. Clara took it, read it briefly, and smiled faintly. "That's Sofia's handwriting." "I guess that much," Lucas said. "What I want to know is why. What kind of person writes something like this for a child they've only known a few weeks?" Clara set the tea tray down gently and met his eyes. "The kind of person who's lived through enough to know what it means to feel small and scared." Something in her tone made him pause. "What do you mean?" Clara hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "She didn't tell you?" "Not surprising. She's not one to share easily." "Tell me what?" Clara lowered her voice, though the kitchen was empty except for them. Her parents died in a car accident when she was 18, left her with a younger sister, barely a toddler. Most girls her age were thinking about college parties or their first jobs. Sofia was figuring out how to pay rent, buy groceries, and keep a child from realizing how broken the world could be. Lucas's brows drew together. She raised her sister alone? From what I know, yes. Worked 2 jobs, studied at night when she could. She's resourceful, stubborn, and she doesn't quit on people. That's why Lily... Clara trailed off, glancing toward the ceiling, as though she could hear the baby upstairs. That's why Lily trusts her. Lucas looked down at the note again. A lump formed in his throat before he could stop it. He had assumed so much, that Sofia was simply another young woman taking a job for the paycheck, that her warmth was something easily turned off when the contract ended, but now he saw it differently. She wasn't just filling a role, she was showing Lily a kind of steadfastness he hadn't realized was missing. He slipped the note back into his pocket and murmured, "Thank you, Clara." That afternoon, Lucas found himself lingering outside the garden doors, watching Sofia push Lily's stroller along the winding stone path. The baby's giggles floated back to him on the breeze as Sofia stopped to let her reach out toward a patch of lavender. She spoke to her softly, her voice carrying just enough for him to catch snippets, small observations about the flowers, the colors, the way the sunlight danced on the leaves. It took him several minutes to decide to approach. When Sofia noticed him, she straightened slightly, her smile fading into something more polite. "Mr. Blackwell." "Lucas," he corrected, though the word felt strange leaving his mouth. "Do you have a moment?" Her posture stiffened. "If this is about last night?" "Which, it's not," he cut in. "Well, not exactly." He took a breath, trying to choose his words carefully. Apologies weren't something he was good at. "I may have misjudged you." Sofia's brow lifted, clearly skeptical. "May have?" Lucas allowed himself the faintest smile. "Fine, I did. I've been cautious, overly so, but I read the note you left for Lily, and He hesitated, glancing at the stroller where Lily was chewing on the sun hat of her sun hat. "I want you to know I appreciate what you've done for her, more than I've said." For a moment, Sofia didn't answer. She adjusted Lily's hat, her fingers gentle, and said, "I wasn't expecting gratitude, just trust. That's harder to come by." Lucas nodded slowly. "I'm working on it." He shifted his weight, feeling oddly like a schoolboy asking a favor. "Would you and Lily join me for lunch in the garden tomorrow?" "Nothing formal, just the three of us." Sofia blinked, caught off guard. "Why?" "Because I think," his gaze drifted toward the lavender patch again. "I think I've been standing too far back, and I'd like to change that." Her lips curved, but not quite into a smile. "All right, but if this is some sort of test..." "It's not," he promised, a little too quickly. She studied him for a moment longer before nodding. "Fine, tomorrow then." As she pushed the stroller back toward the house, Lucas stayed where he was, watching the sway of the lavender and listening to the faint sound of Lily's laughter fade into the distance. His fingers brushed against the note in his pocket, and for the first time in a long while, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was room in this house for something warmer than rules. The next day dawned clear and bright, the kind of morning that made the Blackwell estate's gardens glow like something from a painting. Lucas had chosen a spot beneath the wide branches of a maple tree, its leaves casting dappled shade over a small table set with simple fare: grilled chicken, fresh bread, a bowl of ripe berries, as if the choice of food might help lower the quiet wall between them. Sofia arrived with Lily balanced on her hip, the baby already reaching for the bright red berries on the table. Lucas rose from his chair instinctively, pulling it out for her before he realized the gesture felt surprisingly natural. "You didn't have to set all this up," Sofia said as she settled Lily into a high chair. "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I wanted to." For a few minutes, they ate in a comfortable silence, broken only by Lily's occasional babbles and the faint hum of bees among the garden flowers. Lucas found himself studying Sofia when she wasn't looking. The way she tilted her head toward Lily's sounds, the soft cadence of her voice when she spoke to the baby. It was grounding in a way he hadn't expected. Halfway through the meal, he finally asked, "Why did you write that note?" Sofia paused, a slice of bread halfway to her plate. "Because she needed to hear it. Even if she can't understand the words yet, the feeling stayed. Most people would have just soothed her and left it at that." She gave a small shrug. "Most people haven't been where I've been." Lucas leaned forward slightly. "Clara told me about your parents." Sofia's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in quiet caution. "She shouldn't have." "Maybe not," he agreed, "but I'm glad she did. It explains a lot." Her gaze drifted toward Lily, who was now smearing berry juice on the tray. "When my parents died, I thought the world had ended. My sister was barely walking, and I didn't know how to be an adult yet. But every night, no matter how tired I was, I'd tell her she was safe. that she was brave. I guess old habits don't fade easily. Lucas was silent for a moment, feeling the weight of her words settle in the air. He thought his own losses had hardened him, made him cautious to a fault. But here was someone who had been through just as much, maybe more, and instead of closing herself off, she'd found a way to give more of herself. "You've been good for her," he said finally. Sofia's lips twitched, in something like a smile. "For Lily? Or for you?" He let out a breath that could almost have been a laugh. Maybe both. Lily chose that moment to squeal, waving a berry-speared hand toward Sofia. Without hesitation, Sofia reached over, took her tiny fingers, and kissed them. The baby giggled in pure delight, her joy spilling into the quiet space between the adults. Lucas realized something then, the unspoken truth that had been hovering since the night of the storm. He'd been watching for her to slip, to break the pattern of warmth she'd shown Lily. Instead, she had been consistent in a way that left no room for doubt. After lunch, they lingered in the garden, letting Lily crawl on a soft blanket spread across the grass. Sofia pulled a small cloth lion from her bag, a worn little toy she'd brought to keep Lily entertained. "Be brave like a lion," Lucas murmured, recognizing the phrase from the note. Sofia looked up at him. "Exactly." He sat beside them, close enough to hear the tiny babbles Lily made as she clutched the lion. It was the first time in months he had joined in like this, without feeling like an intruder in his own daughter's moments. As the afternoon waned, Lucas walked them back to the house. At the steps, Sofia paused, shifting Lily onto her other hip. "Thank you," she said softly. He frowned. "For what?" Seeing her heart sung. "For meeting us halfway." Lucas nodded, though the weight of her words stayed with him long after she disappeared into the nursery. He understood now that trust wasn't something he could demand with rules or expect with time alone. It had to be built, moment by moment, with patience, with presence. That evening, alone in his study, Lucas took the note from his pocket again. He placed it in a drawer, but not carelessly. It was kept with a few other personal things, items that mattered, reminders of what couldn't be replaced. And for the first time in a very long time, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow. The morning began with a stillness that felt almost intentional, as if the world itself knew something important was about to happen. The air in the garden was warm but fresh, carrying the scent of newly cut grass and the faint perfume of blooming roses along the edge of the stone path. Lucas had been pacing in the study for nearly half an hour, working up the nerve to ask the question that had been on his mind all week. He finally found Sofia in the nursery, kneeling beside Lily's playmat as the baby smacked two wooden blocks together. Sofia looked up when he entered, a faint smile on her lips. "I want to try something," Lucas said, his voice quieter than he intended. "With Lily. I think she's ready." Sofia tilted her head, studying him. "You mean walking?" He nodded, his eyes darting briefly to Lily, who was now attempting to pull herself to standing with the edge of the crib. "She's been holding herself up more lately. I know it might be early, but—" "It's not too early," Sofia interrupted gently, "and it's good to let her explore. But—" she hesitated, her gaze sharpening slightly. "Do you want me to lead, or do you want to—" Lucas swallowed. "I think I want us to do it together." The way he said us made Sofia pause for a moment. She had grown used to the way Lucas guarded his words, keeping emotion at bay like a man who had been burned before. But there was something different in his tone now. Not just determination, but hope. That afternoon, they chose a spot in the garden where the grass was soft and even. Sofia carried a small basket of Lily's favorite toys, a stuffed rabbit, a wooden rattle, a plush lion, and a small ball with bells inside. Lucas set them along a short, clear path, the toys spaced out like stepping stones, each one just far enough to encourage. Lily sat in the middle of the blanket, eyeing the plush lion with unmistakable interest. "Okay, Lily," Sofia said, in a warm, coaxing tone. "Let's see what you can do." Lucas knelt a few feet away, holding out the lion. "Come on, sweetheart." His voice was softer than Sofia had ever heard it, the edges of command replaced with something fragile and unguarded. Lily rocked forward, pushing herself onto her hands and knees. She made a small, determined sound, almost a grunt, before pushing up onto her feet. Sofia instinctively moved closer, her hands hovering just in case, but she didn't touch. "Step," Sofia whispered. "Just one." Lightly, Lily wobbled, arms out for balance, her small face screwed up in concentration. Then, one step, another. Her knees bent awkwardly, and for a moment it looked like she might topple forward, but she caught herself and took a third step. Lucas's breath caught. "That's it," he encouraged, his voice shaking slightly. "Come to me." Lily made one last lurch forward and tumbled directly into his arms. Lucas caught her against his chest, letting out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. His arms tightened around her, his face pressed against her soft hair. Sofia stood a few feet away, smiling despite the lump in her throat. She had seen countless first steps in her years caring for children, but this was different. There was something about the way Lucas held his daughter, as though she were his anchor in a storm he had been adrift in for far too long. He looked up at Sofia, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Thank you," he said simply, but the way he said it carried a weight that made her heart squeeze. Lightly. "Don't thank me," she replied quietly. She did the work. That night, the house felt unusually quiet. The storm of the past weeks, the fever, the arguments, the tension, seemed to have eased into a fragile calm. Lucas found Sofia in the kitchen, rinsing out Lily's bottle. "I need to tell you something," he said. She glanced at him over her shoulder. "All right?" "Kinder," he began. "You haven't felt alive since my wife died," he said, the words sounding like they had been trapped inside him for years. "Not really. I went through the motions. I kept the company running. I kept this house standing, but I was just surviving. Today, when I saw her take those steps, it was like something woke up in me." Sofia set the bottle aside and dried her hands. "That's what children do. They wake us up in ways we don't expect." Lucas nodded, looking down at the floor. "I don't think I could have gotten here without you." Sofia didn't answer right away. She studied him for a moment, trying to read the expression in his eyes. It wasn't the guarded stare she had grown accustomed to, nor the cool assessment he often gave when making decisions. This was different, almost. "You worked. You would have found your way," she said finally, her voice steady. "Maybe not today, maybe not this way, but you love her, Lucas. That would have been enough to guide you." He leaned against the counter, exhaling slowly. "I'm not sure I believe that. For months, I kept telling myself I was doing my best, but the truth is, I was doing just enough to keep her alive, not enough to give her the life she deserves." Sofia's gaze softened. "Sometimes survival is all we can manage for a while. That doesn't mean you failed her. But you're here now. That matters." There was a long pause. Lucas' eyes drifted to the window, where the moonlight painted the garden in pale silver. The same garden where Lily had taken her first steps that afternoon. He thought of her wobbling toward him, the way her face had lit up, the sound of her small laugh. That single moment had cracked something open inside him. He turned back to Sofia. "You've been patient with me, more patient than I deserve." Grieving, she replied. "Grief doesn't follow rules. It's messy. It makes people act differently." And then, Lucas's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. "You mean difficult?" She almost smiled back. "That too." For a moment, they simply stood there, the silence between them no longer heavy, but almost comfortable. It was Lucas who broke it. "I'd like to make tomorrow special for her," he said. "For Lily, I want to take her to the park, maybe have a picnic. Would you come with us?" Sofia hesitated, caught off guard by the invitation. "Of course," she said finally. She'd like that. The next day dawned bright and warm. They took a blanket, a basket of simple food, and Lily's favorite toys. The park was quieter than usual, the trees rustling softly in the breeze. Lucas set Lily down on the grass, and she immediately began exploring, crawling toward a patch of daisies before plucking one and holding it up like a prize. Sofia laughed, kneeling beside her. "That's beautiful, Lily." Lucas watched them, the sunlight catching in his hair, softening the sharp lines of his face. There was a gentleness in his expression now, one Sofia had rarely seen. Every so often, Lily would pull herself to standing, testing her legs again. Lucas stayed close, ready to catch her if she stumbled. When Lily managed to take a few unassisted steps toward a ball Sofia rolled her way, Lucas let out a cheer so genuine that other parents in the park turned to look and smile. "You're a natural," Sofia said to him when they sat down to eat. "Hardly," he replied. "I'm just learning to be present." They stayed until the sun began to dip low, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold. On the way home, Felipe fell asleep in her car seat, her tiny fist still clutching the daisy. That night, after Sofia had put Lily to bed, she found Lucas standing at the nursery doorway, looking in. He didn't turn when she approached. "I used to think moments like this were something you planned for," he said quietly, "but they just happen. And if you're lucky, you're there to see them." Sofia's voice was soft. "That's the thing about first steps. They only happen once, but the impact? It lasts." Lucas finally looked at her, and for the first time since they had met, there was no distance in his eyes. "Thank you," he said again, and this time it felt like more than gratitude. It felt like trust. Sofia nodded, her throat tightening. "You're welcome." Neither of them said anything more. They didn't need to. In that quiet moment, something between them shifted for good. The early autumn sunlight spilled across the front steps of the city's largest children's hospital, bathing the stone facade in a warm, golden glow. A soft breeze rustled the banners that read, "Hawthorne Children's Learning Wing, Opening Ceremony." Beneath them, a modest stage had been set, decorated with bouquets of white lilies and pale yellow roses, the flowers Lily's mother had loved most. Kuldus stood near the edge of the stage, adjusting his tie for the third time. He wasn't nervous about public speaking. He had addressed hundreds of investors, journalists, and board members over the years. But this was different. This was personal. His eyes scanned the small crowd gathering in the courtyard. Hospital staff in crisp uniforms, parents holding children in their laps, and a few familiar faces from the community. Then his gaze found Sofia. She was at the far side of the courtyard, helping Lily adjust the bow on her pale blue dress. The little girl, now nearly 2 years old, was chattering away about something only she seemed to understand, her small hands animated as she spoke. Sofia laughed softly, brushing a stray curl from Lily's. Lucas felt a quiet warmth settle in his chest. It had been a year since the day in the garden, the day Lily had taken her first steps toward him. A year of changes, slow, sometimes messy, but always moving forward. Somewhere along the way, his house had become a home again. Sofia looked up and caught his gaze. There was no hesitation in her smile now, none of the guarded distance that had once existed between them. She gave him a small nod, as if to say, "We're ready." The ceremony began with brief remarks from the hospital director, who spoke of the need for spaces where children could heal and learn at the same time. When it was Lucas's turn to speak, he stepped forward, the microphone cool beneath his fingers. Progress began. As an idea, he began, his voice steady but carrying emotion beneath it. But it became something much greater, a promise. A promise to give children a place where they are seen, not just for their needs, but for their dreams. This wing is dedicated to my late wife, Anna, whose compassion for children inspired me every day of her life. And it is also a testament to the people who helped me see beyond my own grief and reminded me of what it means to live fully again. He glanced toward Sofia then, just for a second, and saw her expression soften. Lucas continued, speaking of the programs they would offer. Reading rooms, sensory play areas, outdoor gardens for therapy and exploration, and when he finished, the applause was warm and genuine. For the ribbon cutting, the MC announced there would be a special moment. From the side of the stage, Sofia appeared, holding Lily's hand. The little girl's steps were steady, her pace quickening when she spotted Lucas waiting for her. Without prompting, she broke into a small run, her tiny shoes tapping against the wooden stage. She reached him and grabbed his hand, then looked up at Sofia and reached for her too. The crowd let out a collective murmur of delight as the three of them stood together, framed by the morning sun. Cameras clicked, but Lucas barely noticed. He was too busy looking at Lily, who was grinning up at him with the same fearless joy she had shown that day in the garden. The ribbon was cut, the wing officially opened, and the rest of the morning passed in a blur of handshakes, tours, and smiles. But it was later, when they were finally home, that the day took on its truest meaning. Back at the Blackwell estate, the afternoon light slanted through the tall windows, casting a golden hue over the living room. Sofia carried in a flat, wrapped package, while Lucas settled Lily on the couch with a small stack of picture books. "What's that?" Lucas asked, curious. Sofia smiled, setting it down on the coffee table. "Something I've been meaning to give you for a while. Today felt right." He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a framed photograph. It was from the day of Lily's first steps. In the picture, Lucas was kneeling in the grass, arms outstretched, as Lily wobbled toward him. Sofia was just behind her, smiling encouragement. Between them, a bright ribbon fluttered in the breeze, the prize Lily had reached. Beneath the photo, in elegant script, were the words, "Some steps lead you home." Lucas stared at it for a long moment, his throat tightening. He remembered the exact sound of Lily's laugh that day, the way the sunlight had hit Sofia's hair, the shock of joy that had surged through him. "Peace," he began, but had to pause to clear his voice. "This is perfect. Of how far we've all come." Lucas placed the frame gently on the mantel above the fireplace. The glass caught the fading sunlight, making the image glow as if lit from within. Lily toddled over to inspect it, pressing her small hand against the cool surface. "Me," she announced proudly, "and Daddy, and Sophie." Sofia's lips curved into a quiet smile at the nickname. "Yes, that's you," she said softly. "Your first big steps." Lucas crouched down beside her. "And every step since," he added, his voice low, meant as much for Sofia as for Lily. The three of them stayed like that for a moment, an unspoken recognition of everything they had been through to reach this point. The storms, the sleepless nights, the sharp words, and the quiet reconciliations. It all lived in that single photograph, not as weight, but as proof of their bond. As evening settled in, they shared a simple dinner together. Lily babbled about the new big house they'd visited that morning, referring to the hospital wing. She described the bright murals and the toy corner in the reading room with wide-eyed wonder. Lucas listened with an attentiveness Sofia had rarely seen in him during those early days. After dinner, Sofia helped Lily into her pajamas, her gentle hands smoothing the fabric before lifting the little girl into bed. She sang a lullaby, the same one that had calmed her in the midst of her first thunderstorm, while Lucas leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching quietly. When the song ended, Sofia tucked the blanket under Lily's chin and brushed a kiss against her forehead. "Sleep well, sweetheart." Lily yawned and murmured, "Night, Sophie. Night, Daddy." Lucas stepped into the room, crouching to kiss his daughter goodnight. They stood together in the soft glow of the nightlight for a moment before leaving. In the hallway, Lucas spoke, his voice softer than she expected. "I don't think I ever said thank you for staying. For her. For me." Sofia met his gaze, steady and calm. "You don't have to thank me, Lucas. This is where I was meant to be." Something in the way she said it made his chest tighten, the words carrying a weight that reached beyond the role of nanny. It was a truth they had both been circling for months. They walked back to the living room, where the framed photo still caught the light. Lucas glanced at it, then at her. "It's not just some steps that lead you home," he said. "It's the people who walk them with you." Sofia didn't answer right away. Instead, she moved to stand beside him, their shoulders brushing, both looking at the image of a small girl and two adults whose lives had once been marked by distance, but now felt irrevocably entwined. The fire crackled softly, filling the silence. Outside, the garden lay in shadow, but in his mind, Lucas could still see the ribbon dancing in the breeze, the moment that had changed everything. Eventually, Sofia turned toward him. "So, where do we go from here?" Lucas looked at her, and for the first time in years, his answer came without hesitation. "Forward, together." Lily's laughter echoed faintly from her room, the sound like a promise, not just of the life they'd built, but of the future still waiting to unfold. And in that moment, as the night closed around the estate and the photo stood between them as both memory and vow, Lucas knew they weren't just a family by circumstance. They were a family by choice. Forever,